Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the FCGA annual webinar, this year themed The Future of Work. My name is Juanita Clark, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Digital Council Africa. I'm broadcasting this morning from a very, very cold Pretoria, South Africa. Today, it is my privilege to lead the Fibre Council Global Alliance annual 2021 project. For those who do not know who the Fibre Council Global Alliance is, the FCGA consists of the 5 councils co-representing the fibre industry in the regions across the world. In 2012, the 5 councils came together in Munich, Germany, and signed an MOU to outline this Memorandum of Understanding and our collaboration. The FCGA comprises of regions across the world, including Europe, the Americas, which includes North America as well as Latin America, the Middle East and North Africa, or MENA, as well as Asia Pacific. The Council signed this MOU to strengthen our collaboration and to drive the message of the great need for high-speed broadband connectivity across the globe. We felt at the time that it was appropriate that we agreed on the message that we wanted to send across the globe. And I hope to some extent we've succeeded. The FCGA meets regularly to collaborate on general topics of interest within the fibre community. And of course, one such initiative, which most of you will know about, is the global definition of terms. Since I joined the FCGA almost a decade ago, many faces have changed, and as a result, I've been privileged to work with some of the greatest minds in the global sector. People that have truly understood the industry, the importance of this technology. People that have in-depth knowledge of the challenges that face their respective regions. And people that have a clear understanding of the policy and regulatory environments and the requirements that shape our regions. I've been privileged to spend time in Brussels with the European Commission, who extensively presented their broadband strategy and their vision for Europe. And I've had the privilege to meet with the FCC in Washington, who shared their challenges of broadband in rural America. The leaders in their respective regions have immense convening power and influence. And I'm sure that today, every person on this webinar will walk away having learned something. Today, the global leadership of the FCGA will themselves present the findings of the 2021 webinar. As mentioned before, the FCGA strives to develop an annual research paper, which often culminates into a webinar. In early 2021, we thought it appropriate to consider the pandemic, as everybody was across the globe. But for us, it was important to look at the impact on the telecommunications sector, and more specifically on the broadband sector. We wanted to better understand what impact access to broadband had on the workforce, amongst other things. We wanted to understand the challenges that people who do not have access were facing. This research that is conducted annually and was conducted globally, and mainly between the first and the second wave of the pandemic. Before I hand over to our keynote speakers, allow me to just quickly do a little bit of housekeeping. This morning, as we present our findings of this research paper, you're going to be asked to participate in 2 polls. As mentioned before, our research was conducted between the first and the second wave. But speaking for myself, just in South Africa, we're already in the 3rd wave and currently in a hard lockdown in South Africa. So when you receive these polls, what we're trying to do is to see if anything has changed in the last couple of months since we've done our research, so that we can then have a discussion about that towards the end of our webinar. As mentioned, there'll be a short roundtable discussion at the end of the presentation, led by the leadership of the FCGA, representing their respective regions, and maybe drilling down a little bit more into the findings of their specific, things that were specific to their regions. So please feel free to post your questions and your comments in the question box, and we will then present them to the speakers towards the end. Then lastly, please allow me to introduce you. Please introduce yourself in the chat. If you so wish, of course, it's not compulsory, but if you'd like to, please introduce yourself in the chat. It's always nice to know who has joined us and where you're based in the world. So please feel free to share who you are and where you're from in the chat. And then, of course, now with further ado, allow me to introduce you to Mr. Vincent Garnier, our keynote speaker. And Vincent is the Director General of the FCG, of the European chapter. Joining Vincent is this morning is Gary Bolton, who's the President and CEO of the Americas, and he will represent both North America as well as the Latin chapter. Then also welcome to Rusafi Alam, who is the General Manager for the Asia Pacific region. And also joining us this morning is Khaloud Al-Dorgam, who is the Director General for the Middle East and North Africa. As mentioned, my name is Juanita Clark. It's a great privilege to be with you today. And on that note, it's a great pleasure to hand over to Vincent Garnier of FTTH Council Europe. Vincent, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Juanita. I'll move to the next slide. And welcome, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I will start with some information, and I need to first move the slide in the right direction. Yeah, I will start with some information regarding the methodology used for this study. The survey has been conducted, as Juanita said, at the end of April, early May, for a period of 2 weeks. Each regional council invited its respective audiences to participate. Each of us used the very same questionnaire, but it has been distributed by each council independently. We contacted our members as well as a variety of professionals active in the telecom ecosystem from our contact list. We received answers from people from a large variety of roles, starting from C-level architects, engineers, but also marketing professionals, consultants, and investors. In total, the survey we are presenting the result of today is based upon almost 500 responses at global level. Now, if we analyze a bit more in detail the profile of respondents, we see that the different types of organization active in our industry are well represented. Network operators and vendors make 2/3 of the respondents, and contractors nearly 10%. The breakdown by geographies, by region, shows a certain overrepresentation of North America and to a lesser extent Latin America. This probably represents the importance and the size of the North American Association compared to the other region. And it could maybe limit a little bit the relevance of some comparison between regions. Although one of the key takeaway of this survey is the remarkable homogeneity of answers on the most important questions. So actually, we do not think that the geographical distribution is too much an issue. Having said that, we are conscious that the sample surveyed is not precisely representative of the actual population. We are focusing on the telecom industry, and as I said, some regions are a bit less represented than others. It should therefore be seen as a contribution to the very important subject of the future of work, and will complement and strengthen similar studies made on the same theme. So before I dive into the details of the results, I would like to share with you some key takeaways. The first concerns work from home policies, company policies. A clear consequence of the pandemic is that companies have been forced to formalize work from home policies for their employees. Over 50% of the respondents declare that their company had no work from home policy prior to the COVID-19 crisis. But they are close to 80% to declare that they now have one, a very big shift. Working from home is no longer seen as a privilege authorized for the happy few, but it has become now a standard practice accessible to most employees and which has proven its value during the pandemic. This result is actually consistent with the answer to another question we asked to our panel, which indicates that 75% of the respondents expect to be working from home, at least on a partial basis, rotational basis, by the end of the year. The second key finding I would like to share with you is that residential internet is no longer seen as a luxury. Prior to lockdown and orders to stay, the inefficiencies of internet service were tolerated as the average household used internet services largely for entertainment and email, rather than the entire household simultaneously using bandwidth-hungry application for mission-critical work or education or connecting with friends and family. So the utilization of the internet shifted from simply being a tool for entertainment purpose to more critical applications such as attending important professional meetings via collaboration tools, and children having to participate in classrooms to ensure that they stay up to date with their curriculum. When asked about the challenges of working from home, 52% of respondents indicate that bandwidth, either download or upload, and internet connectivity were among the top challenges. These results concur with the feedback we hear from most operators in our different regions. The pandemic has significantly changed the way internet subscribers, see residential internet. It becomes a must, and people are more likely to pay attention to the performance of their broadband service, even though we will see later that they still struggle to understand technology differences between the different broadband technologies. And that's the third finding, we also asked the question whether the pandemic had encouraged people to relocate. Our survey indicates that 83% of respondents have not relocated yet. Now, this does not mean that the pandemic will not have a longer-term impact on where people decide to live. There are multiple signs showing that people are looking for larger homes, looking for adding 1 or 2 rooms to be more comfortable for working from home. They are also considering moving to new areas altogether and are looking to towns with a good connectivity. These towns now actually are called Zoom towns. For example, some families in the United States are moving away from big cities like Chicago in favor of less expensive areas such as Florida beaches, while others opted for more rural or mountainous areas such as Texas and Montana. It is in these areas where affordability, less crowding and stress levels, and improved work-life balance were cited as reason for the move. In South Africa, this is being referred as sea migration, Maybe Juanita, you will be able to tell us more about this later during the Q&A session. And according to the US National Association of Realtors, 1 in 3 workers is considering moving to a new state if remote working continues. Now, these trends have not been measured yet in our survey as they take time to materialize, but they are nevertheless very much pregnant in our societies today. And finally, we wanted to highlight that we got several feedback around the idea of feeling safe at home. Interestingly, some respondents indicated that feeling safe from a health perspective and the ability to work internationally without traveling were particularly beneficial to them. It was not a specific question we asked. It came spontaneously expressed via the comments section of the survey. For some, clearly the lockdown has not been seen as a constraint, but more as an opportunity to enjoy the protection of their home while staying connected to the world. So maybe a different perspective from what is perceived by the majority, but it was interesting to highlight this point. So after highlighting these 4 key findings, let us move to the next slide, which analyzes the various access network technologies. We asked our audience the type of broadband internet technology they were using at home. The graph on this slide is partly consistent with what we know of the situation of each region. For instance, cable or HFC networks are well represented in North America and Latin America, whereas it's a bit less present in Europe and APAC and quasi non-existent in Middle East and Africa. Satellite only appears in North America and Africa, which makes sense according to our parallel information. However, respondents seem to be underrepresenting the traditional corporate telecom line. And also we notice that wireless seems to have been confused with Wi-Fi. Despite the fact that our audience is supposed to be particularly well informed about broadband technology, these results are a good illustration that when people are asked to react as simple broadband consumers, subscribers, they do not really care about the access network technology they're using. Additional elements in the survey, like qualitative comments, clearly indicated that subscribers have a very simple approach when it comes to their internet connection. It works, it doesn't. It is fast, it is slow, period. When we discuss with the operators, many share similar findings about subscribers' approach of their internet connection. Technically, most access network technologies end up with a Wi-Fi router, which is the interface subscribers are familiar with. So actually, they don't really want to know about the technology behind. That's at least a striking finding of this survey. Now, when we are trying to ask our audience to identify the key technology challenge they had while working from home, we see that half of the problems are related to connectivity, lack of bandwidth, internet connectivity failures, or VPN crashing. And we saw some significant differences there between regions. Latin American respondent indicated bandwidth constraints being highest at 41%, followed by North America at 33%, while Europe was much lower to highlight these problems with 22% and Sub-Saharan Africa only 12%. This could be correlated with the fact that cable broadband is reported as insufficient, cable compared to fiber connection, cable being in higher proportion in the US compared to Europe, for instance. Many respondents indicated that current speed on their cable-supplied internet was insufficient, especially in terms of upload speed, which has become critical for video calls and many applications using the internet connection from home. Several respondents indicated that their connectivity challenges were not resolved and ultimately had to wait it out along with the usual basic self-sustained troubleshooting techniques such as rebooting routers, modems, and PCs. Some relief came about by simply going to the office when it was safe to do so, upgrading the internet service to support higher speed when it was available, service call to provider, and working with remote IT department. But for others, more extreme, what is called here brute force tactics, such as switching off cameras, is in almost all video conferencing systems, rearranging video conferencing time to non-busy hours, and switching to single-room office space at business centers were among the remedies. It is commonly understood that fixed network in most regions really passed the test of the pandemic during the first wave, and that the vast majority of the population has been able to work or learn remotely during the lockdown periods. What our survey shows is that this has been achieved with sometimes really suboptimal experience and some poor connectivity situations, which have maybe been perceived as acceptable during these unexpected and exceptional circumstances, will certainly not be tolerated when remote working becomes a recurring practice. The brutal shift to work from home has put a lot of stress on companies' digital infrastructure. Our survey has tried to measure what type of IT investments have been made as a direct consequence of the generalization of remote working. In attempts to improve the work from home experience and keep productivity, business took action with respect to updating infrastructure and capacity. These efforts and investment include purchasing more servers and software for more VPN to increase capacity, moving software to cloud environments, supporting employees with remote working software and hardware, and that includes collaboration applications. The investment also concerns IT service and data security, adding extra space to file sharing into cloud connectivity and digital signatures. It is in these areas where some relief can be achieved. However, they will not solely help at-home workers being able to conduct high-volume internet-related activities if they do not have enough bandwidth or high enough speed for their internet service to support the expected usage. So the slide highlights some regional differences, like the higher investment level in MENA, the important data security investment in Africa compared to North America, for example, or the importance of in-home network security software investment in Latin America. While employees have been stuck at home and were facing some connectivity issue, we wanted to measure what technical support they received from their companies. It's worth noting that while some companies were well prepared to support remote workforce, many found themselves in the position of having to make changes in technology investment, both infrastructure, subsidies, and devices. This investment came in several ways to alleviate issues or improve the at-home work experience and support work-at-home employees, including laptop purchases for every employee, subsidizing commonly used technologies such as internet and phone services, Companies that did not already support remote workforces handled support in a few ways, but this varied region to region. So according to the feedback we got from the respondent of our survey, regions with the lowest equipment subsidies were Latin America, MENA, Middle East and North Africa, and Asia Pacific, while Europe and Sub-Saharan Africa have reported higher level of equipment subsidies. On the other hand, a small percentage of respondents indicated that their company made no investment at all to support the shift to remote work, meaning employees purchased their own laptop, camera, desk, monitors, while some were allowed to take equipment from the office and bring them back home. In our next slide, we will show the proportion of professionals which think that they will return to the office by the end of the year, either full-time or part-time. But before I share the result with you, let me ask you the very same question, thanks to the poll function available on our webinar platform. So it should appear on your screen now. The question is, will you return personally to the office by the end of 2021? And will you do that 100%? Will you do it on a rotational basis? And will you do it at 50% capacity, or do you plan to stay working from home? So I give you maybe another 20 seconds. I'm looking at the collection of results now. It's progressing nicely. I think we now have 60% of the audience having voted. Let's give you another 20 seconds to express your view on this question, and then we will share the result. I think I can now, we seem to stabilize at 70% of attendee voting. Maybe another few seconds. All right. So 17% of you declare that they will return permanently in the office at the end of the year. Approximately half or 60% of the respondents say that it will be on a rotational basis or 50% capacity. And 26% plan to stay working remotely. And this is quite interesting because it seems to be very consistent with what I will share with you right now. Moving to the next slide. Yeah, so let's look at the answer from our survey to the very same question. Only 23% plan to return full-time to the office at the end of 2021. And you indicated 17%. We are at a very similar level. 30% say they will remain in remote workforce mode, while our audience said 26%. It's very striking how close the results are. And about half of the respondents say they will adopt an hybrid approach, going to the office on a rotational basis or at 50% staff capacity. Actually, our findings are fully aligned with the Gartner survey from the end of 2020, which revealed that 82% of company leaders said they plan to allow employees to work remotely at least some of the time. And many reports in different regions concur with this. This is also consistent with the information we shared earlier about the strong development of work from home company policies, many of which are acting the fact that employees can work remotely at least part-time. However, we should point out that our survey concerns mainly professionals which can work, which work can be performed remotely. And I guess the same goes for the audience of the webinar today. It's not representative of the entire population. And it's clear that For many roles in manufacturing, retail, or for instance, working from home is simply not an option. Nevertheless, the results confirm that the crisis we are going through is very likely to have a significant long-term impact on the way we work. For large global organizations, this is probably just an acceleration of an evolution which started before 2020. But for many small, mid-sized businesses, especially the more traditional one, this is a major change which has to be operated in a very short period of time. Before the coronavirus crisis, many managers were reluctant to develop remote working because they assumed it would probably negatively impact the productivity of their team. So in our survey, we addressed this point. And before I share the result, let me bring our second poll and ask the very same question to you. So this concerns productivity. And do you think that productivity increased, decreased, or stayed the same during the pandemic? Again, I let you click on the different possible answers. Already 50% of you have already voted. Let's give ourselves another 10 seconds to complete the voting. I think we have now 80% of the audience has voted. Thanks very much for your participation. This is really great. And let me share the result with you. So according to the group present on the call today, nearly 50% believe that productivity has increased. 34% say the productivity remained the same. And for 17% of you, it actually went down. Well, let me say that once again, this is really a great audience because you're exactly matching what we see in our survey. That's really impressive. If you look at the slide concerning productivity, our respondents say at 47% versus 48% in our survey today that it has increased. For 38%, it has stayed the same, and you said 34%. This is unbelievable. And only 14% see a reduction in our survey, which is exactly the same thing that this audience is actually considering. And to be fair with you, it goes really against the sentiment that most people managers were having before the pandemic. Now, in our survey, the Middle East, Northern Africa region has shown some differences with the rest of the sample. A significant proportion felt that the productivity decreased. This might be a point we could discuss during the discussion later with Kholoud. It seemed that the connectivity challenges faced in that region might partly explain these results. Overall, our results are aligned with other reports published on the subject. For instance, a study by Stanford University of 16,000 workers over 9 months found that working from home increased productivity by 13%. And I guess that we all experience the multiple reasons which can explain a higher productivity level when working from home. The absence of commuting time is a major one. The absence of distractions, since we have no colleagues popping up in our office. Maybe also the difficulty to separate work time from personal time, leading to more hours in front of our computer. And maybe also the fact that our boss think that we're supposed to be constantly reachable and keep on sending information and requests. Many elements explain this trend. However, what we have reported here, and I guess what you use to base your answer to our poll, is much more difficult, is a question of perception, and it's much more difficult to evaluate properly productivity with precise metrics. So this is what motivated the question we are referring to in this next slide. Using a variety of tools and tactics can be helpful in keeping productivity levels up and maintain competitive advantage. So we asked our audience how productivity was measured while they were working from home. And we listed a certain number of tools that you can see on the slide. The results are a bit difficult to interpret. There is no one leading reporting method, and multiple systems are used. Interestingly, however, approaches using task or time tracking and productivity tracing tools seem to be used in similar proportion compared to the more traditional methods. And if we zoom on North America, the data are not shown on this slide, but they've been captured by the survey. So on North America, 45% of respondents indicated that employee productivity has increased. Now, of the 45%, of these 45%, 22% are measured through milestone tracing, 28% are measured through monthly or quarterly reporting, 22% use time and or task tracing, and 22% use objectives or key results system. I would say it will be interesting and maybe a bit frightening to observe how management methods evolve after the pandemic. Indeed, if working remotely becomes the norm, it really contributes to increasing the percentage of our working time spent via digital devices. Less physical meeting, more online interaction. As a consequence, the vast majority of our work time can be tracked and analyzed. I guess this consideration goes beyond the scope of this survey and is more a personal reflection, but there might be some consequences with the vast majority of the working time of an employee being technically trackable. I have one last slide, and this one concludes my section. Before I hand over to Juanita, I just want to inform you that we have produced a white paper which details most of the points I address in this presentation. It will be available, or it is already available from the respective websites of the different organizations presenting today. The second part of the webinar will enable us to share more regional flavor and views about these topics, and of course address questions coming from the audience. So with this, back to you, Ranita, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Vincent. That's really interesting, and I think a lot of food for thought. As Vincent mentioned, there is all the findings is available in a white paper, which the respective regions will distribute to their member database. So just in conclusion, we're going to enter into our roundtable discussion now, but just a quick recap on some of the recommendations that I think is important. So I think what's really being highlighted by the research that we have discovered is that it takes a few initiatives with priority to set a policy, to revisit delivery metrics, and to educate employees on online tools that can be used to capture this work from home opportunity. We know that the pandemic caught everybody off guard. Employees were literally overnight told to go home and to start work from home, and many of them weren't prepared. To make things worse, many employees were in a hard lockdown where schools were closed, where suddenly they were being mom, dad, as well as caregiver, online homeschooler, and they had to remain productive within their environment. We believe and understand that that must have had a massive impact on their productivity as they were trying to juggle children and feeding and education together with their day-to-day jobs. But that's quite unusual. What's more important for us is to understand what this looks like going forward in a normal work from home environment with schools that are open and with adequate support for people working from home. The other thing that was highlighted is that when possible, we need to, and companies need to consider offering a subsidy to employees to encourage them to follow the company vision to work from home. Many people don't have adequate resources to provision their own environment, and here a subsidy of sorts or an incentive of sorts would really make a big difference. And then to use a combination of tools to measure productivity at both a business unit and a company-wide level. So really what we believe is that companies need to revisit how productivity is measured. And this is one of the things that came from people, is to say that the old-fashioned ways of measuring KPIs is not going to necessarily work going forward, and that these need to be revisited, and then the procurement and production forecasted should no longer be 3 years out. I think we've all learned that our lives can be upset in a moment's time, as we're seeing in South Africa currently, for those of you who are following the news. And then we need to advocate for fibre to the home to support work from home. You know, we are very faithful believers that work from home will produce many significant benefits for society. Vincent sort of touched on it in South Africa. It's called semigration of people that are not moving beyond the borders of the country, but they are certainly moving around. We've seen massive semigration of people moving from Johannesburg and Pretoria to coastline, trying to find a better quality of life. We believe that work from home is good for the environment. We believe that it will curb urbanization. Our cities are bursting out of their seams, and we believe that if we can find and encourage people to work from home, that it will be very good for urbanization. The other thing is, of course, there's this massive impact on the quality of life for people working in smaller communities. And in addition to that, we've seen that many of our small towns and our rural communities need to be rejuvenated. A lot of them are at risk of becoming ghost town. Their infrastructure is falling apart. And if we can encourage work from home and allow people to work from anywhere, which is after all our message, then you know, we will also see a rejuvenation of small towns. So at this point, we're going to move into our Q&A with our round table participants, which is the leadership of the Global Fibre Council Alliance. And it gives me great pleasure now to also introduce Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fibre Broadband Association, based in North America. And Gary, I think it's really early morning for you. So we hope you know that you're well, and thank you so much for joining us. We know it's difficult to accommodate all the time zones. It's also my privilege to bring Khulud Aldorgam in. Khulud, I think you're based in Dubai, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you very much for joining us today, although the time difference is not as bad. You know, it's a little bit better. And then Rusafi from FTTH Council Asia Pacific. Welcome, Rusafi. Yeah, it'll be nice if each one can just tell us where you're based, and then sort of what time it is there with you, and whether we're having a juice or a strong cup of Java to stay awake, or prepare a warm cup of milk before we go to bed. And Gary, I think I'm going to start with you while we give Vincent a moment to have just a comfort break. So LATAM obviously is part of your region, and I'm curious to understand a little bit whether there were significant differences between what you experienced in North America versus what the LATAM region experienced.
Thanks, Juanita. And as you said, you can see it's a little bit dark in my background. It's I guess it's 3:45 a.m. here, so it's a little bit early. I'm in my home in Huntsville, Alabama. So if you know where that is on the map. But yeah, so I'm responsible for the Western Hemisphere, so the Fiber Broadband Association, North America, and our LATAM chapters. And so what was kind of interesting is there was a pretty wide range of connectivity challenges. And I think if you remember that chart that showed the different technologies that we used across the globe, it varied quite a bit. Where you look at the Middle East, North Africa was much more wireless. In the U.S., we saw a little bit of satellite. Certainly, our audience had a high usage of fiber to the home, which was good. But we saw that, especially in Latin America, we saw some interesting things in that even though it had the most use of fiber to the home on our responses, we saw the highest level of lack of internet connectivity. So basically, if you weren't connected to fiber home, you were really suffering. And we also saw the high levels of bandwidth constraints. And so we had, in North America, we had done a study during the pandemic that looked at rationing. And we saw that the lower your bandwidth, so if you were a rural area and you had, like say 4 megabits downstream, 1 megabit upstream, you were rationing, spending 11 hours a week basically sitting around waiting for internet to work. And you were telling your kids to get off, they might be doing their school from home, or your spouse might be doing a Zoom video, but it made it very difficult for multiple family members to be online at the same time due to rationing. So, I think one of the fortunate things about the timing of the pandemic is that, if we look at like 10 years ago, a decade ago, our national broadband plan in North America was at 1 megabit. So I think we would have all been struggling a lot. So, bandwidth connectivity definitely showed up as being paramount during the pandemic.
Thanks for that, Gary. I think we've seen that's something certainly that I think we've seen across the world, and we're forecasting that demand to absolutely increase. I think globally, putting a lot of pressure on operators. Khulud, I wanted to ask you something next. There's an old saying. I actually wrote it down because I didn't want to get it wrong. There's an old saying that goes, managers think they witness productivity when in fact they only witness presence. And COVID-19 proved to many companies that not all employees need to be present in the office to remain productive. And companies are seeing this immense opportunity to reduce their overheads, by reducing the amount of facilities that they have in physical workspace, that they have to that they have to be paying for monthly. And certainly we've seen in South Africa, one of our largest banks is a bank called Nedbank. It's what we call one of the big five. And they announced a week ago that they will have a permanent work from home strategy now going forward. So we expect that this will give rise then to this semigration that we refer to, of people moving to the Zoom towns, as it's called in the US. But I guess my question is whether you think this would then trigger companies to try to renegotiate employee benefits. We all talk about quality of life in small towns, and the lower cost of living, etc. But do you think that because it's less expensive to live in remote areas, that companies will opportunistically try to say, well, now we need to renegotiate your package? One of our findings is that recommendations is that people are saying, they want an incentive. Yet conversely, we're seeing that companies are potentially looking towards renegotiating. Do you think that this is going to be a trend?
Well, thank you, Juanita, and thank you everybody, and thanks to all the attendees who joined us today from different time zones. And first, Juanita, allow me to say that I think so many companies in our region, so it's not, or I can say it's uncharted region territory in terms of work from home policy and work from home experience, especially for the local companies. Because as you know, we have international companies and local companies. I would like to say that yes, we have seen in the region some companies who are negotiating their employees to have or to relocate to a different country with less expenses in terms of accommodation versus salary reduction. So I think, yeah, in the long run, if working from home stays, and nobody will know how long it will stay, or if it will become like a new future. I think, yes, so many companies will try to renegotiate the employees in terms of shifting their, let's say, countries to different countries, but I believe that companies should work more on the legal framework with all the employees to make it more organized and to make it or the impact of what they do on the employees. Juanita, I would like to if you allow me to comment on one of the main figures in the study, which is the productivity. As we saw in the study that mainly most of the reasons the productivity figure increased, but in the main reason in specific, it's almost 43% of the respondents from the MENA campus said that the productivity decreased. I would say that MENA region has been seen its fortune next during the COVID-19 with income from natural resources like oil and gas and the tourism. So big challenges, even prior to the pandemic, in 1 month, all the challenges start to show up in the region. And the pandemic can make things even worse. We dive into the survey results so that this result is what a combination of many elements occurred at the same time. First, we can say the low work from home policy prior to COVID-19, which means that this option was not tested before COVID-19, and it needs time to be adapted by the employees and the companies. One more reason also I would like to say that the measure of productivity.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The line is actually quite bad. So we have many attendees sending messages in that direction. I'm really sorry. Could you maybe conclude rapidly, because they struggle to hear you, and I don't want to, to give them a bad experience.
All right. Can you hear me well now?
It's still problematic. It's probably the line or the microphone.
Okay.
If you maybe have a headset or something, then we can come back to you.
All right. Okay.
Thanks, Khulud. Rusafi, on that note, you know, you come from a region and you represent a region in Asia Pacific that's really varied. I mean, you've got countries that have just got like absolutely the connectivity that we can only dream of, and then you've got that countries that you know, really struggle with getting connectivity you know, rolled out. So just in general, how has the pandemic influenced the rollout in your region, and has it had an impact, you know, more particularly on the countries that are lagging in the deployment of broadband infrastructure?
Thank you, Juanita. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So I'm Rusafi Alam from Asia Pacific, Fiber to the Home Council Asia Pacific. I'm the general manager. So the question, to answer your question, Juanita, as you mentioned that we in APAC covered the highest fiber deployed market in the world, such as Japan, South Korea, and China, as well as some developing nations also we have, who are in recent time excelling in the recent years in terms of fiber deployment, namely Philippines, India, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia. They all are in the forefront of year-on-year growth, around between 20 to 40% growth rate. And India, being the topper for its fantastic growth rate of 230% than the previous years, which is really amazing to note. So I just want to give example about how the deployment and growth is going ahead. Again, just giving you an example about India and Philippines specifically, where the average broadband speed were 32 Mbps in India in mid 2020. Now the average speed is 52 megabits per second. So which is like a very high kind of jump. This whole country is on fire, and their MNOs and fixed operators are doing really great. Also, talking about Philippines, it has jumped about 35 points from 21 to 57 Mbps in just 1 year. So this clearly shows the infrastructure is improving heavily, and the capacity is steadily going up. So I can conclude that improvements of 5 years has already done in 2020 to 2021 timeframe due to the pandemic crisis. By these, the telcos and the service provider as well as the customer are more focused on quality internet, which is taking shape by fiber deployment in our region, and it will go even higher in the coming days, which will eventually give a push for 5G, smart cities, and IoT development, which we aim for the next generation. So thank you. That was my part.
Rusafi, if I'm not mistaken, I think you're based in Bangladesh.
Yes, exactly. I'm based in Bangladesh. My time is like 3 p.m. Afternoon.
Good. Thank you very much. Vincent, I'm going to ask you a very similar question. I want to know, we always look at developed countries like first world countries, and, we sort of hang on the lips of the FCC and the European Commission about their, their broadband strategies, and, and we know that they've got visions. Has the pandemic accelerated those visions? Have the European Commission made any new announcements, or are they sticking to their guns and saying this is our 2050 or whatever vision? Or are they finding ways of accelerating broadband, especially to more rural areas?
I think the pandemic has essentially accelerated things. That's true of the vision and plan of the European Commission. This is also true of the action of the different member states. It really helped politicians give priority to infrastructure development, and has really contributed to a very concrete acceleration of their plan. Question is no longer whether or not fiber is what is required. The question is how fast and how deep can fiber can be deployed. So we moved from a question of choice in favor or not of fiber to a question of how do we implement it. And the Commission is also producing recommendation and directive and toolboxes, best practices to help really from an operational standpoint, support the activity of the different member states. The other thing I would just briefly highlight is the fact it was striking that FTTH deployment and telecom in general is now seen in combination with the fight against climate change. Politicians are seeing a digital society as one side of the same coin as sustainability work. And they see FTTH deployment as an essential enabler of digital society, which will help us organize the society.
Over here.
Organize the society to be sustainable.
Sorry about that. I thought I was on mute. Somebody tried to put some water down for me. So then I think we're pretty much out of time. I want to thank everybody for their time today. And yeah, it's really been a phenomenal privilege to work with this leadership, all of whom you have met this morning. There's another session that'll taking place my afternoon. Gary, it'll be a more respectable hour for you. So we look forward to seeing you, everybody, a little bit later for the North America chapter session. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Gelut, we're going to catch up with you this afternoon session. Very interesting remarks. I know we spoke before the sessions, in our prep sessions, and you've got a really interesting, take on things that's different. So we look forward to hearing from you. And Rusafi, we know that it'll be quite late for you when you join us again. But thank you, everybody, for your time. And of course, be reminded that the information will be shared. It's available on most websites or will be shared amongst the members. But thank you, everyone, and have a great day. And we look forward to keeping in contact. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.